Hello, everybody. Today is October 10th, and I have some good news and some bad news. The good news, I got ready for the hangout and just fresh out of the shower. As you can see, I'm still glowing here. The bad news is our key speaker, also known as Mr. David Amerland, doesn't seem to be appearing for some reason. I don't know where he is. It's usually not like him, so hopefully nothing bad happened. And so I can't really. I guess we can talk a little bit about chapter 18, 19, but maybe he'll show up a little bit later. So in the meantime, I'm going to do a little rant on Google Plus since you're all watching and David isn't here yet. I kind of wanted to talk to him about that too, but we can pick it up first here. So Google Plus is shutting down, and everybody's freaking out and jumping up and down and everything else. And some people are going to miss it. According to Google, many people won't miss anything because they're not using it. They're supposedly only using it for 5 seconds at a time. I don't know how Google came up with that kind of statistic. I think their analytics are, I don't know, failing them or something. Because I cannot even imagine how anybody can use this for 5 seconds. I mean, what you can possibly do in 5 seconds other than take a cursory look at your notifications. That's about it. I mean, the fact that you have notifications, not the actual post in those notifications. But with that aside, Google pulling their, BS that they've been doing for years now with, killing the Google Reader and killing the Wave and killing soon they're going to kill Inbox, all these different products being killed, Google Spaces, the whole graveyard of dead Google products now. And if you listen to me over the years, you know that I used to be a staunch believer and supporter of Google, not so much anymore, as you can tell from my tone. I still like a lot of their stuff, but I also don't like a lot of the things they're doing, including killing of Google Plus here. But before you get too disappointed, disenchanted, whatever, with Google Plus being killed, it's not really being totally killed. They came out with this breach that happened to them months ago, and personally, I think Sundar Pichai should be fired for sitting on this information, not releasing it to the public. And I'm sure they fixed it pretty quickly, but they should have come out and said. I mean, the fact that they had a situation with this information being available through API, you know, it can happen to anybody. I mean, every company makes all kinds of mistakes, and so it's not an official excuse, but it's an understandable one. That sometimes things happen, and that's where you have patches, and you try to do the best you can. The reason why I think Google should be slapped on the head and hard for this is because they sat on it. They should have never sat on it. They should have disclosed immediately that they had this issue and not wait for months and months and months. And then when they finally disclosed it, they're saying they're going to shut down the public or the non-G Suite version of Google Plus. Totally lousy thing to do. Very unlike Google, actually, from the old days. People who supposedly said do no evil back in the beginning. Now they're acting like a huge company, which they are, doing crap basically. Microsoft number two is Google now. So with that being the case, as you can tell, I'm not very happy with them because of these things. And but let's talk about the shutdown itself. It's not going to happen till I think they said August, the end of August of next year, 2019. So there's about roughly 10 months out there left to still use it and do whatever you're going to do with the data. Now, right now, they don't really have anything decent to be able to get the data out, but that doesn't mean they're not working on it. They're not going to come up with something. My guess is they probably will come up with something. They just haven't announced it yet. So currently, like for example, yesterday I downloaded my one of my communities that didn't have too many posts just to see how it downloads what it does. And unfortunately, even though yes, you can download things, that's the good news. The bad news is that it's kind of useless at this point in time the way it's set up, because the community I downloaded gave me a HTML file, meaning a web page with a bunch of links to all the posts, and that's wonderful. The problem is it links back to Google Plus, which means that once they shut it down, then it's going to be pretty useless at that point because it's going to point to 404 pages. Another possibility is they might leave all the content open. I mean, nobody said anything yet, but that's a possibility, I guess, where they will prevent people from doing any commenting or creating any new content, but whatever content is there will still be there. I mean, nobody said anything like this, so I'm just speculating. But that would be a possibility. In that case, you could download and you could actually link and still get to your information to view it. So that's one thing they could do, but I doubt they will do it. My guess is what they're probably going to do is write some kind of tool. I mean, that's what I would do if I was them. That enables you. I mean, they already have the part about extracting the posts and this and that. All they need to do basically is create little HTML pages with the posts themselves. So they would create a bunch of files, stick them in the same archive, and you essentially would have one web page per post. Potentially, you can have thousands of, if not tens of thousands or more of those. But they would be very small files. They'll be text files, so it'll be pretty small. The only thing that will eat up some room would be images. So any images that you have in your posts, those would definitely eat up some room in terms of, because you have to download all the images too. And so it would be a very time-consuming process in terms of how long it would take to do it, online. Very much depending on your internet connection, and also it will be, in addition to that, it'll also basically mean that you're going to have to go through the process. You'll get all the stuff downloaded, and you'll be able to look at it, pull it up. So that's kind of part of the solution. Unfortunately, it's not a full solution, because even though you have all this content on your hard drive somewhere or in the cloud, wherever you want to keep it, what are you going to do with it? It's not like you can upload it to some other platform easily and have the same post magically appear with comments and everything on another platform. And which platform? Some people will migrate to Facebook. Some people will migrate to other platforms. There is a social network called mewe.com, mewe.com. They have something kind of similar to, it's a little Facebookish, but it's definitely not the Facebook type environment. So you're able to do chats. I mean, it looks like it's a potential beginning of decent platform. So you can also post images, you can post videos, you can do comments, things like that. So that's one possibility. There's another one called Mastodon, mastodon.com, which allows you to have private and public networks that you're running yourself. So essentially, you're able to create a network which is either private or public, and then you're able to communicate with people in that network. Whoever wants to join that particular deal, you're actually hosting it yourself. So whoever creates these things needs to have a hosting environment somewhere to be able to host it, and then other people can join, and they can either participate in the existing network or also talk to people in other networks as long as they're public. So it's a possibility. The idea there is that you don't have a single entity like Google running a network where everybody and their brother joins at one point, and then they just shut it down, so everybody's kind of left on the street in the ditch, which is essentially, not totally, but essentially partially what Google is doing right now. Okay, so there are several different possibilities in terms of where people might migrate, and of course you need to have that platform, whatever it is, enable you to take the format Google is saving its posts in and import it into their network. My guess is a lot of these networks will do it because there's potential of a lot of influx of a lot of members to their network coming in, because you're going to have all these refugees for Google Plus, but at the same time, it would need to be done. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to import the data. And of course, if you can't import it, it's pretty much useless. So then, of course, you have another challenge where you have potentially lots of people who are trying to import all this data, and so you want to make. I mean, these people who are running these networks want to make sure it doesn't crumble, because Google has some major muscle behind it in terms of data centers and servers and all of that. Not too many companies have that kind of infrastructure. So if you're going to go to some kind of new network, and all of a sudden you're going to have a million people jump in and load 10,000 posts each with graphics and videos and everything else, it needs to be able to handle it, which is another iffy. Will they be able to handle it or not? So it's not just a matter of where you're going to go, in a matter of, can I extract my data? Can I take it with me? But can I actually physically put it somewhere else? Meaning not just take it with me, meaning extract it, but also put it up on some other platform. So those are all, relevant questions. And uh, at this point, I don't think anybody has good answers to how they will be answered. But I guess we'll find out as months roll along. So let's talk a little bit about um, the implications of what Google is actually doing. I spoke yesterday to this gentleman in a Hangout, not in a Hangout actually, it was a Zoom session. So staying away from Hangouts also partially here. And Michael Daniels, very astute individual, very knowledgeable. And so his theory, I didn't even think about it, but the guy has brilliantly stated that what Google is trying to do here is they had this problem with this data, potential data infiltration, or exposing information for about 500,000 people about their posts and stuff. And what they're trying to do now is not so much deal with it, but just indicate it's done and shut the thing down as a kind of part of the aftermath. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to monetize Google Plus. And so when he said that, initial reaction was, what do you mean monetize? They're not monetizing, they're shutting it down. But if you really think about what the guy said, it makes a lot of sense. He says, look, Google is not killing Google Plus. They're simply killing it for the free access for the public. They're not removing it from their paid platform, which is G Suite. So their whole platform, sorry about that, their whole platform uh, for businesses, which is called G Suite, where you have Docs and you have spreadsheets and you have Gmail, all of that. People pay, roughly around $5 a month to have a subscription to this service, and they have some additional benefits capabilities, and that's usually what they sell to companies. But Google Plus is part of it, and it's going to stay part of it. It's not going anywhere. It's one of the G Suite applications. So they're not really killing it completely. They're just killing it for this free tier, but for the paid tier, they're leaving it alone. And in fact, they're probably going to continue to work on it and hopefully improve it, things like that. Everybody knows it can definitely be improved in many ways. And so, with that being the case, he says they're not really killing it. They're just simply monetizing it by saying anybody who is using it for free now can still use it if they want to. They don't need to migrate, anywhere. They just can continue to use Google Plus, but they need to get a G Suite account. Now that opens another question about, okay, if you get a G Suite account, like in my case, I do have a regular account, Gmail account, Google account, and a G Suite account. The question becomes, okay, I can't right now take my post from Google Plus, my public Google Plus, and move it over to my G Suite account at Google Plus. I mean, there is no mechanism right now to easily do that, to import all these posts or migrate them from place to place. Google had this done for people who use Gmail and Outlook, where you can go from one account and pull your email into another. So they had all these tools, but not for Google Plus, at least not yet. And so my guess is they're probably going to come up with something like that. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they did. But when you look at it from that perspective, it makes perfect sense. I think he says, they're total dummies when it comes to marketing. And, I agree with him on that topic because this was a totally wrong way to monetize Google Plus. All they had to do was go out to all the members and say, this is the situation. If you want to continue to use it, it's going to cost you X amount of dollars per month. You can sign up and start using it that way, or you're going to lose your basically there's not going to be any free tier anymore. That's all I had to do. Just be honest about it, do it that way. But instead they came up with this, ass backwards approach where they're basically saying we're going to shut down this, but we're going to continue running it on G Suite, which implies that if you do sign up for G Suite or you already have G Suite, you can continue to use Google Plus with all its features, capabilities, and things like that. So, whether this was their intent or not, I don't know. I think what Michael said is very smart. I think it's definitely very much could be their strategy. It's just a stupid way how they're doing it, but it very much could be. So essentially, anybody can take their current situation and they can open a G Suite account, by paying $5 a month for G Suite. They will get more storage on Gmail. They will get, there's some additional bennies you get by using G Suite. And then on top of it, you'll be able to continue to use Google Plus. And so you just start using Google Plus for that purpose. it's not initially everybody thought G Suite was only for businesses. It's not only for businesses. It can be used by individuals too. I mean, nobody says that you have to be a business to sign up for G Suite, but you do have to pay for it. And so, uh, by the way, I have some discounts. I think for like I think it's like 20% off for the first year, and I think the prices were, I have to double check recently, but it's pretty cheap. I mean, it's only $5 a month, and I think if you sign up for a year, then it's $50 a year, 49.95 a year. So you end up getting it for whatever, even cheaper than that. So for something per month. So it's totally affordable. I mean, no question. For all the software you get, all the capabilities you get, collaboration tools. I mean, all of it is more than worth it in terms of how well it works and everything else. I've seen and used, Office 365 with all kinds of problems with it, and definitely like Google approach better. Even though I'm mad at Google at this point, still like their approach better. And so I definitely would recommend it. So, get G Suite, jump there, pull up your Google Plus. The question is, will everybody, or at least all your friends and people you want to deal with, or all of your whole community in Google Plus, will it migrate to the G Suite? Obviously, not everybody's going to do it. Serious people will. And maybe that's one of the ways how they want to prune all the idiots that post porn and everything else. Maybe that's their way to do it, to keep it clean and keep it, uh, because a lot of people used to create posts because they could, typical thing. But now that you're paying for it, maybe it's going to be a totally different class of people. Number one, a little bit more thinking people, and you that way it'll have better content. Things I don't know. I mean, it all remains to be seen. But that's basically what's going on. So if you wanted to, before you start jumping off bridges because Google Plus is shut down, it's not shut down on the G Suite side. And if you're willing to pay about $5 a month for having access to it with all of its capabilities, in addition to having more room in Gmail and more storage and things like that, then G Suite is the answer. No problem. As far as, like I said, the migration from there to G Suite, Google Plus from your existing account, that's a whatever, however many dollars question for Google in terms of what they're going to do. I'm hoping they're going to come up with some kind of tool that'll just simply say, if you get on G Suite and you have Google Plus enabled, because this is something that your system administrator needs to enable. You can't do G Suite. As G Suite has system administrators because it's meant to be for businesses, and then you can either enable or disable certain apps. So you have a lot of control over who can use what and things like that. And so Google Plus is something that you can enable or disable. So obviously you'd enable it and you'd be able to use it. And then everybody else who is um, the only question I guess I would have is I don't know how that would work with people coming from other domains, because typically G Suite means it's a number of people, could be a lot of people, but all being in the same domain. But if you're going to have everybody, getting their own G Suite accounts, that means they would have to use their own domains. And in terms of then being able, well, I think it'll still allow you to. I'm not sure. I never tested that, so it'd be interesting to see if on Google Plus you can, when you use G Suite, you can actually let other people come in and share, become members of your communities, things like that, where they're coming from different accounts. So that's something I'm not sure if it's outside of organizations, as they call it. So, bunch of questions basically. Nobody outside of Google has the answers which way they're planning to go, what they're planning to do. Obviously, this was a total shock to the system because nobody saw it coming. I mean, you had articles for years now saying that Google Plus is ghost town and nobody's using it, blah blah blah. While all of us who actually are using it, we're kind of sitting and continuing to use it. But so that part was in place. But in terms of details and statistics, I mean, Google has been silent for years, and they seemed like they were doing some work on it, but basically they were botching it up. Ever since Vivek Dotra left, the whole Google Plus thing went down the tubes, and their redo of it was just pathetic in terms of what they did. Um, I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Very on Google, like, let's put it this way. Um, so, but that's what we have with Google Plus right now. And for whatever reason, now I'm beginning to worry because it's been 20 minutes and David still hasn't shown up. So I think we're gonna have to postpone this particular hangout with David unfortunately, because he's not here. I don't know if he is coming at what time, but it doesn't make sense to have anybody sitting and waiting and see if he shows up or not. But we will reschedule and we will do it again, and we'll get him in and see what develops. So I think this is pretty much everything I wanted to say on the Google Plus story, and I guess for now that's pretty much it. So I thank you for coming and listening, and I do apologize on behalf of myself and David that we couldn't do the four V's, strings, and things. Hold on, hold on. Uh, okay, he was doing a Windows upgrade. That was a mistake. He says, and it just finished. He says. So let me tell him to jump in. Okay. So it looks like we are going to do it after all. So if you're still there, keep watching. David will be here shortly. He was doing a window upgrade that just finished, he says, at this minute with three question marks. And it says still rebooting. Be with you in just a sec. Okay. Final for the program still loaded. Okay, so he's going to be a little frazzled. Windows updates are always fun, especially latest ones that kill your data. So, as much as I rag on Google, I've never lost a file on Google Docs. I mean, on Google Drive. And clearly, Microsoft is amazing to me that after they've been in business for as long as they've had, the amount of money they have, the amount of cloud they have, and they still can't release a normal OS upgrade, just beyond my comprehension. But it is what it is. So the moral of the story: do not buy Windows stuff. This new. Speaking of Google, they announced yesterday. I mean, speaking of good things Google does, they announced yesterday the new Google Slate, which is a Chrome OS tablet that can also be docked to a nice little keyboard, kind of foldable keyboard and folio. Um, and also it has you can get a pen for it. So the whole package is like $900, definitely upscale type environment, but a beautiful, beautiful machine. And I'd like to see how much of a performer it is. It can run Linux apps, they said, so it's that powerful. In terms of, it just would be nice to see how performance of it is. And also, it's got great resolution, beautiful display. I mean, everything they showed looked really, really good for it. And so just a little pricey at this point because the Slate itself is $600. If you buy the folio with keyboard attachment, it's another $200. So now you're at 800. And then if you want to get the cool smart pen, as they call it, or I think they call it smart stylus or something, that's another $100, $99. So essentially, if you add three together, which is what if you wanted to have a laptop equivalent, that's what you want to have. You need to have a keyboard. You need to have you don't have to have the stylus. So you're minimum at 800, but potentially at 900, so you can really get some touchscreen capabilities with writing with pen and everything. So you have everything, best of everything. You have your keyboard, you have your touchpad, you have the stylus, and you know, and you have your touchscreen, of course. So it looks like a killer box. So that's going to be, I'm sure, a big seller for them. I just hope the price comes down a little bit. And of course, it boots up. I mean, it's Chrome OS, so it just boots up in no time at all, which is always awesome. It takes me back to my old days of Amiga when I used to be able to boot up my Amiga computer in 9 seconds, which no computer since then has been able to do until Chrome OS came out. Now you can do it in Chrome, and I'm sure that thing will also run the Android apps. Um, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it will do that too. So, very nice, very nice. And, their new Pixel 3 phone looks awesome in terms of, especially camera capability is just beautiful in terms of what it does and how it works. And they got the multiple cameras, what they do with being able to do selfies in the wide format and a bunch of other capabilities. And, it's got AI built in to do a bunch of smart things for you. And just really nice. I mean, with all my ranting on Google at the same time, they definitely put out some good stuff too. It's not just all bad. But Microsoft is just baffles me. They keep releasing this ridiculous stuff, and some people, a lot of people continue to buy it. So go figure. All right, David, where are you? Okay. Another link again. It should be showing up shortly here. So yeah, I think Pixel 3, from what I've seen, looks like it's going to be my next phone. Pixel 3 XL, their bigger version, is essentially the same thing, just a bigger screen. It's a little too big for me. I mean, that's 6.3-inch display. That's just too much for my hand. Because I remember I used to have my last phone was 5.5-inch, and that's what Pixel 3 is. And my hand would hurt from time to time. I didn't know why, but then when I got my S7, which is a 5.1 or 5.2-inch, I realized why it was hurting it, because the phone was too big to hold like this. As much as I hold it, it's just a little too big. So hopefully this Pixel 3 will be. It seems like it's a little bit thinner, just a little taller but thinner. But beautiful phone, just really really nice. And so I think it's going to be my S7 is coming up to its 2-year end cycle. So I think I might have to upgrade to Pixel 3 with the birthday coming up. We'll see if we can swing it. And so between the Slate thing that they came up with, and now they came up with Google Home Hub, as they call it, which is okay. My son, I got him one of the smart displays from Lenovo, and that was considered to be better than original Echo Show from Amazon. But now the new Echo Show they just came out with is supposed to be even better than that. So we'll see. This new Google thing is pretty cool, except it doesn't have the camera built in, which I think is a major omission. They're trying to make sure they don't catch David in his bedroom doing anything he shouldn't be doing. Hello, David.
With that introduction, hello. How are you?
Excellent. David made it back. Congratulations to
Thank
David
you.
for being.
I've got a brand new Windows update. I don't no idea why it took so long. It just
That'll
took
teach
forever.
you not to use Windows. With that said, let's move right into the portion of the show here we were talking about. So we're going to talk today about chapters 18 and 19. For those who don't know, quick introduction: David is a world-renowned author. He's an analyst. He's for a lot of big companies. He is a speaker. He is author of 10 books. I think 10 or 11, David.
It's 14 at the moment.
How many?
14.
14 books.
Yeah.
I take back what I said about 10. 14. So
Yeah.
four books ago, he was at 10. So 14 books. And one of the books is called SEO Help, which he wrote a number of years back. And so we're going to talk about chapter 18, 19. There are 20 chapters. We're going to have one more video after this one for the last chapter. And that's basically going to be it. Because of the unusual circumstance of what happened today, and of course we're blaming it not on David but on Microsoft, because they're to blame. What we're going to do, I think we will start with something a little different before we get into 4Vs. I'm assuming 4Vs, I don't remember, I think it's been so long. I think it stands for
volume,
effectiveness,
velocity. It's volume, velocity, variety, and veracity.
I thought there was a victory in there somewhere. Okay, and not vindictiveness. Huh? Vindictiveness wasn't
No,
like,
that's
okay.
a different.
My bad.
Different
No, but we'll talk about the 4Vs and strings and things. But before that, David, I started before you joined us. I started talking about the newest and latest development of what Google Plus, what's happening with Google Plus. So I gave it my spin on it, and I just wanted to get your take on it and get a few words, because a lot of people are definitely concerned these days, and so they'll be listening. So what is your take on this whole Google Plus situation going right at this point?
Well, the background to it is technical, really, from Google's point of view. Potential breach of privacy, potential leakage of private information. Nothing really happened there, but Google are closing the loopholes, and they're taking the streams away, which is essentially the public stroke consumer interface of Google Plus. I think communities are going to survive in some sort of rebranded form. All the other products, photographs, Hangouts have been spun off already. So it's that area of it which is going to be closed down, and that's the area that the APIs were using, the developer APIs, which potentially created that breach. But really, it's Google cutting back costs, maintenance, and they don't really need it anymore in terms of the benefits which it gave them directly in terms of search and the social signal, because search has developed in different ways. So is it going to affect marketing? No, it's not. Is it going to affect individuals? Yes, it is. It's the first Google product that actually takes away a community feeling from its audience and its members. In the past, we used to use products like Google Reader that was just a product. Okay, you were attached to, not invested in it in terms of your digital identity. Google Plus was totally different. People invested a lot of what they did here, and it became part of their digital identity, which meant then it became part of their public persona, which was how they interfaced and joined other people and other groups, etc. So potentially, I think from a brand impact point of view, this is going to be bad for Google. How bad, we don't know. But they're going to lose a little bit of trust and a little bit of loyalty, when arguably we're at the time when they need both of these things. Is it a good call? No. Is it inevitable? From an Alphabet point of view, and let's bear this in mind, it's Alphabet making the decision, not Google. Yeah, it's something which, from a corporate point of view, makes sense.
Okay, let me run a concept by you, which somebody else came up with. It wasn't me, but I thought it was really smart. And tell me what you think about that. I had a conversation with Michael Daniels yesterday, and I already mentioned it earlier, but I wanted to run it by you since you haven't heard it probably. The guy thinks it's nothing more, like you said, that it's a financial economic thing, and they're simply forcing the issue with people. His point of view is they're not killing it. They're simply saying if you want to use it, you have to use G Suite. And so they essentially, they're saying that they're going to monetize Google Plus by simply forcing people to migrate over to G Suite. Those people that want to use it, be able to use it that way. And so all they're doing is monetizing. What's your thought about that as a possibility?
I don't think Google really would monetize it that way. Sure, they want to make money from G Suite from a corporate point of view, but everything happens strategic as opposed to just making money, because making money is one-off thing, whereas strategy actually has a greater impact and it brings you more and more money for less and less effort. So by bundling Google Plus into a corporate environment, you are giving corporations what they really need: an intranet that's secure, that's responsive, that has various levels of controls and checks and balances that can be used by many people in different ways. We know that Google has been using a version of Google Plus internally in tandem with the public version, which we've been using ourselves. So they are well versed in how to do that in a corporate environment. In a corporate environment, because there are no API calls, all the security loopholes are closed off. So it's a very secure environment for a company. So it makes more sense for them to do that and actually gain a deeper foothold in a corporate sector, which has more money to invest on an iterative basis, than hope to get $9-10 from each of us. And although, there's probably millions of us who probably use it, but I guess. And you think, oh, that's a lot of money. Well, yes and no. Yes, it is, but not for Google. Well, the value of the money bundled to them goes with the market share which they would get in a particular sector. As consumers, they already have us in their market share. So getting a little bit of money from us this way, it wouldn't make a lot of strategic sense, and it would create a lot of bad feeling. Whereas getting money from a corporate sector, well, that share which they don't have, Microsoft is doing way better there than they are, and so is Amazon with its Azure services. So this is something which they need to get into and makes more sense.
Why don't you think they opted in instead of creating all these bad vibes and getting their staunch supporters like myself from before being totally mad at them as I am right now, and I'm sure there's many other people who are mad. You don't get mad normally, but you should get mad over this. But if you really, jokes aside, why didn't they at least look at the possibility of saying, okay, it's costing us X amount of dollars to maintain it. It's done for the most part, so we're maintaining it, and this is what the costs are. What if we went out to the membership saying, look, we can't continue to support the thing the way it is, so you're going to have to pay X amount per month if you want to be part of the mix. And if we don't get sufficient amount of money to be able to continue with this, we're going to have to shut it down. Wouldn't that be, at least from the PR standpoint, a much better way to try not to piss off their own community?
From a PR standpoint, yes, you're right. It would be better. But again, if they had gone down that path, eventually it would have the same outcome. And let's examine what you said a little bit more critically. Let's suppose, just for argument's sake, that there are 50 million of us willing to give them money. And that money, let's say it's an arbitrary $10 per month.
Right.
Oh, that's a lot of money every month. But from Google's point of view, here's what it is. You have a committed base of 50 million people. You're not going to get more people because now there's a price barrier to Google Plus, and already they're not getting enough people in. So really, you're looking at a declining number of users moving forward. So you start off with a pool of 50, and in 10 years' time or 5 years' time, you end up with 45. And then 5 years' time after that, you end up with 40. So you begin to drop off.
Hold on.
Eventually,
hold on. Let me stop you there for a second. I'm sorry.
okay.
If you have 50 million people paying $10, that's you're bringing in $500 million a month.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not saying it's.
No, hold on. If you're bringing $500 million a month, you can hire a lot of engineers who can be continually improving to the platform. It doesn't have to be maintained. You don't need that kind of money to maintain something like this, but you can work on. And then why wouldn't other people migrate to it if it was good enough? Why not?
Well, first of all, let's. I'm looking. We're only second guessing here.
Right.
But essentially, if I were a Google strategist, and I've sort of been in a lot of strategy sessions from corporates in my career,
right.
And the thinking tends to be a little bit faceless and a little bit inhumane, because at that level you're looking at the figures and you're making projections, and the projections are always on a worst case scenario, because that's what you need in order to make it make sense. So if I was a strategist at Google, I would say, okay, here's the pool of people we have. It hasn't grown over the last 3-4 years. If anything, we've lost people. It's not likely to grow. So we're going to extend the life support of a system that hasn't worked for us, and it's getting us potentially bad PR in the press. We're going to get some money from it, but that money isn't going to help us do very much with it. We'll probably maintain it. We don't really want to spend too much money about, to do that. And we only have so many engineers anyway. We'd rather use them to do something else, which will give us more. So from that perspective, that kind of strategy, it makes perfect sense to close it down. And I know it sounds really bad, and I'm really sad it's going away, but I understand the thinking behind it. It doesn't mean I agree with it, but I do understand it. And I think it makes sense from their perspective. And that's why they wouldn't do what you said. But they would say, okay, here's an out-of-the-box product which we know will work in a corporate environment where it doesn't need to be maintained too much there because we already have the infrastructure. And in a corporate environment, becomes the basis for more services, for increasing market share, which will bring us more potential money, but also it will give us a sector of the market which we don't have. That is a better investment of time and effort and engineering talent. And it makes sense from a corporate point of view. From us,
yes.
It doesn't.
Well, I still think it could have done better, but okay, we'll disagree on that point. Then my other question for you is this. Initially, if you remember, they called it that this was going to be their social fabric. Social was so important, social this, social that. They were going to use it for signals plus ones, for the search, all these different things. Google Plus was going to be the Google 2.0. Remember those stories and everything?
Absolutely, I do.
So
and I think
what's happening from that standpoint?
Well, and I'm glad you brought this up, because this ties intimately into the development of search. Now, Google Plus came along at the same time, almost at the same time that Google switched search from a traditional Boolean search to semantic search. And in semantic search, the social signal was a corroborative signal that was very strong, very necessary in order to verify specific things, in order to understand sometimes the veracity of data, in order to understand the relational connection between different points of data. So you needed a clear, strong social signal. They couldn't get it from Facebook. Twitter was, by their own account, a dirty signal, and they couldn't really get it from anywhere else. Having Google Plus gave them a home advantage because the signal there was clear and they could see exactly what was happening. Since then, Google has integrated increasingly artificial intelligence or machine learning into its algorithm. And that is essentially a black box in terms of how it works at a detailed level. So they set it up, they train it with training sets, training data sets, and then they let it loose and they check the results. Machine learning doesn't need the kind of training or the kind of social signal that Google Plus gave it, because it uses advanced pattern recognition across massive data sets to look at tiny variations that create signature profiles. So basically, if we think that by implementing that, Google freed itself from the need to have a specific social signal, then Google Plus stopped being as important to it. And this is evidenced in the way that Google Plus surfaces in search. About a year ago, you would still get Google Plus posts appearing in search. You would still get Google Plus profiles appearing in search. And gradually they've disappeared because they've been deprecated. And they've been deprecated because they're not as important anymore, if important at all, really. So there you go.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, that concludes our little discussion on Google Plus. And let's move on to, well, before we go, since we're touching the new news and old news, let's go back to SEO Help for a little bit. And, you know, the last two chapters basically had to do with YouTube and HOAs. And so I just wanted to take a little bit of time to discuss, now with Google Plus going away, and like you mentioned before, they divorced photos, they divorced Hangouts before. Hangouts are completely different in terms of HOAs now, the way you start them and how they work. YouTube is, you know, it's like everything is being completely different. It used to be back in the old days of Google Plus with, you know, Hangouts button, you can jump and talk to people immediately. You know, all that stuff went away over the years. So how important is it still from an SEO perspective, things like HOAs and YouTube, which, like I said, were the last two chapters we talked about? How important are they in today's current setup, in your opinion?
They are hugely important. They're important for two or three different reasons, and let's cover them. The first one is branding. You know, if you're going to brand yourself, having aspect of your company, of your brand, doing something which is tactile in terms of the visual spectrum of communication, is hugely important because people relate to it very quickly. The second thing is the way we consume information. You mentioned the early days of Google Plus, where everything was integrated in one environment, and that's what we used to in those days. We used to go to a social media platform, and we expected pretty much to do everything there. And these days, people use apps to do very different things. And even on Facebook, you use Facebook for your friends and family, if you do. And then you go to Instagram for your photographs, and you go to Snapchat for your chat to friends, etc. So we are beginning now to use very specific channels for very specific. We tend to use them exactly for the length of time required to do something very specific. We don't hang around too much there. And this is reflective now of the way that Google has broken up and sort of created the different verticals of its products. And I suspect this is because they are looking at the same data that I am, except in a massive scale, which gives them a much clearer picture. And they can see that we are moving towards the fragmentation of the web and fragmentation of search, if you like, where we are interacting with each other in verticals. So it's almost like a step back in many ways, but it's more responsive to our needs. So to go back to your question, Hangouts and Google and YouTube are very important because of that. They're also very important because the web itself is becoming more visual as bandwidth is increasing, as you get 5G services on phones and Wi-Fi connections everywhere. Having a visual having visual information which you can consume very quickly, it's much easier, much quicker, much faster in many ways than reading a 15-20-minute article where you say 15-20 minutes and I have to process it and think about it and work to pull out whatever takeaways there are. Whereas a YouTube video gives it to you very, very quickly. So visual, very, very important. It's good for your brand, good for search, good for your SEO. You need to do more of that.
So speaking about that, because you always talked about identity and how important it is, everything else from a business standpoint. Before you had this Google profile on Google Plus, you would set up your profile, you would have your brand page, hopefully you would have when you click on about, there's all this information with links to other entities, everything else. Now that's going to be gone. So what do people do in your, what would you recommend businesses do, and individuals too? Like, before I used to send my Google Plus profile personal to people if they wanted to look up some stuff about me, or my PCS profile for the company stuff. It was very simple. It was, one place you could send somebody. So right now, and I had my YouTube channel, I had all that stuff too. Now, how do you see people moving to, what do you give to people to say, this is me, this is my identity?
Okay, that's an excellent question. Let's examine why we did that. What you said, we used to give either a LinkedIn profile or a Google Plus profile. You say, that's where I am. And the reason we did it is because there was an element of independent corroboration in terms of our identity, and also independently provided validity in terms of our services and quality. So they could see, for instance, if you went to Google Plus and you had X amount of posts, they had X amount of interaction and engagement, they could see that you weren't a flake. You weren't just saying I'm good. You could actually put out and backed it up. The same thing with LinkedIn. Now we're moving into almost a step back, where we would have, either as a company or as an individual, to have a website, which is your personal space, which you control. And around that website, build a social presence, which becomes part of the funnel, which you channel back into your website. And now the difference is, because we used to have that in the past, it didn't work very well, because on your own website, you're going to say, I'm the best of the best of the best. and I can do whatever you want.
Right.
And we know this isn't quite true. But the difference between back then and now is that although you will have your own website, that is going to be validated and corroborated by a different number of layers. One is, and we're heading towards it, the independent verification of identity and some services through blockchain initiatives. And that's in our future. And right now, as we speak, the independent validation of who you are and what you say through Google search, which is accrued through your social media activity. So to break it down in plain English, you have your website, you do specific things, you share all those things in social media accounts which you run. Those social media accounts provide corroboration, and they're transparent to search. You send me to your website, I'm thinking, okay, there's Oleg, and this is what he does. I go to Google search, I put in your name, and you come up in all these different conversations, in all these different contexts. And I think, okay, yeah, fine. That's what he says. He's good at what he does, and that's what he does.
How do you do this? But that being the case, obviously, if I do that, it's not just going to be my business part that's going to come up, but my personal stuff too. And then you have this mash, if you will, mishmash of all kinds of stuff, where we're talking about the Winter Soldier, we're talking about the Kavanaugh nomination, we're talking about the machine learning, and it's like, because of all of that being there, it does altogether kind of shows all the different aspects about me. But at the same time, if somebody's looking from a business perspective, it's almost like TMI. You know what I mean? I mean, it's
yes and no, and I'm glad you also brought this up. Now, in the past, accusing each other mostly that, hey, you're not being real, you're not being authentic, you're projecting a persona. we went into the social media space where the constant engagement and interaction arguably brought out more of our real self. And he said, oh, okay, you're being more authentic, you're being more real, you're being more sharing, open, transparent, etc.
Mm.
And now we working in verticals, and you brought up, there's definitely a politicization of the web because across the world, because we are reaching almost tribal intensity in our interactions. And you're saying, okay, what am I going to do now if I have this political, let's say, I have these political posts on my profile? How do I deal with that? And the answer to that is the same answer that we gave to ourselves when we moved from a website to a social media platform. We said, okay, be yourself, being more authentic, be real. If you choose to be political, that's just an expression of your values. You're not actually being, provided you're not being a troll, obviously, expression of your values. So you're not being sort of false in that sense. So if you are making a conscious choice to say, okay, I may lose some business because of political bias. Something people may choose not to interact with me because, I support either left or right or whatever.
Right.
That is a conscious choice you have to make. So what we're having to do right now is what we've always had to do, but in constantly ramped up iterative intensity, which is we have to be intentional, we have to be responsible, and we have to be thoughtful. We have to realize that everything we do has an impact. Everything which we don't do also has an impact. And all those things are part of the identity which we form. So we have to think about it. We have to think, what do we stand for, what we want, how do we want to interact and engage and be perceived,
Yeah,
and
I
act
think
accordingly.
personally, I think we're taking a step backwards in this way because no, I do, I really do, because
Well,
my personal values have
yes.
really nothing to do with my business end of it. And so when you share with somebody your business profile and they look at, like, for example, my PCS page, then you can see what I've done, you can see what I'm doing, you can see what I'm into from the business
Well,
standpoint.
I would. I mean, yes and no. You're almost right there, but this is what I would say. Essentially, if I'm dealing with you as a business person, I would want to know that my dollars are going towards supporting somebody who has the right kind of values. So suppose, just for argument's sake, that you are a white supremacist,
Mm-hmm.
or that whatever. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing business with you no matter how good you are. So if you put that out there and I see it, then I wouldn't work with you. If on the other hand, you happen to be, I don't know, let's say you're left wing and I'm right wing,
Mm-hmm.
and
That would be
and
nice.
I see, yes, and I see that, right, and I want to do business with you, and I check you out, and you're okay on business, and you
Mm-hmm.
simply have opposing political views. Well, then, if I choose just because you don't have the same political views as me to not do business with you, I think that is a pretty poor reflection on me, because we don't all think the same there, and it's a big world.
But that's the
We should
reality in this world, David. That's the way
Well,
people do look.
like I said, some people will choose to make that distinction regardless, and you can't do anything about that. But a lot of people won't, and I think we need to respect that also. And I think a lot of people also begin to respect that other people have opposing views, and again, they will respect that opposing view. And I
Yeah.
know, I know it doesn't feel that way because we're so increasingly politicized to, in a not very nice way, in terms that it's become a little bit tribal. But inevitably, we have to go through some kind of arc in order to arrive at a certain level of maturity, because nobody ever becomes the best version of themselves just because it's the right thing to do. You're always forced by circumstances because that's the way it should be in order to achieve something. And I think that's where it's heading. So unfortunately as it may be, and I know it feels very adversarial sometimes. Um, from my perspective, I see each of us taking steps which are leading to more responsibility, more maturity, and more thoughtfulness than before. And it feels painful. It's an inevitable part
No,
of
I
growing
think
up.
what it's going to be, it's not the painful part that's the problem. The problem is that people who really care about how they're perceived are not going to be true to themselves anymore. They used to be on social media. They're not going to be doing it anymore because of this very thing.
Well,
Because
again, that's a
if
choice.
you're being
Okay,
judged, sorry,
I,
if you're
I, I
being judged, this what smells to me, this thing smells like the story from my mom from back in the old Soviet Union, where she was 17 years old, she went to get a job and they told her she's hired, everything is hunky dory. And then they said, bring your passport, because in Russia everybody had to have a passport. So she brings her passport, and passport passport, I mean, always said what they call the fifth line, which is your nationality. And so my mom brought her passport, and it said that she was a Jew. Okay?
Yes,
And then all
yes,
of a sudden,
yes,
the job was not there anymore. So that's what I'm
yes.
saying. To me, this new environment smells a lot more like that, where people will look
Yeah,
and see. I mean, they're
yes.
already doing it
Okay.
with the skin color,
Okay.
some people.
Yes. Yeah, I think there's a conflation of a particular regime which was very restrictive to a broader environment that's simply adversarial. Would some people act that way? They would regardless. It doesn't matter who they are. There's always certain biases and certain prejudices that work against us. On the greater picture, I think without appearing to become more tolerant, we're actually heading that way because we're learning to become more thoughtful. And what you said about people who choose to hide consciously, whether it's a particular belief or again, that's a choice. And I think when you consciously do that, beyond the desire to appear different from who you are, you also understand the impact of what it is, and it's a conscious choice. Again, that is to be respected to some extent. And if it's a huge kind of discrepancy between what I'm hiding and what I project, it's not sustainable because we can't sustain that. So if I choose, for instance, to, let's say I have social tendencies and I choose to hide them for whatever reason, appearing neutral, well, that's not a big deal. But if I have white supremacist or Nazi tendencies and I appear social conscience minded, the discrepancy is so huge, it creates such huge cognitive dissonance that it's not sustainable, especially if I'm going to be active across different social media platforms that is, respond to different content. Cracks are going to appear. So that, will come through.
So that latest, call from Hillary to be less civil to Republicans, that's, you think we're going in the right direction there?
No, I don't think that. And I think
And the truck,
I
that
think,
somebody burned the truck with the word Trump on it, just because of that, that's also a sign we're going in the right direction?
well, I think all that is indicative of something else, because let's not forget, since you brought up the current president of the United States,
Yeah.
that he sets a tone of discourse which is adversarial and polarized by intentionally. And I think this is wrong. So if we want to be civil to everybody, it has to start from the top. So if somebody in a position of power says, hey, this is the way you got to behave and this is fine, and then you expect everybody else to not respond to that, I think that's the wrong kind of expectation. So I think everything that's happening, whether right or wrong right now, is open to analysis, open to interpretation, and open to thought. And the moment we start thinking about these things, in my book, that's a plus. Okay, the only time we lose out is if we don't think things through, if we act blindly, and we have knee-jerk reactions. If we think things through, even if it's adversarial, it's going to get us to a better place.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, we'll debate that some other time. I obviously,
Okay.
we'll debate it some other time. So
All
with
right.
that,
Okay.
let's move into the current 18 and 19 chapter,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
which is 4Vs. So let's talk about the 4Vs, and then we'll go to the string.
Okay. Let's talk about data in general, because this is key. We live in an environment which is fundamentally made up of data, and everything which we do is data. Everything which consumes is data, and data is driven, or it's made up by 4 vectors, which are basically volume, velocity, as a variety, and veracity, and they're key to this. Now, volume is basically how much of something goes through. Velocity is how quickly it spreads and how quickly it's taken up. The variety is how it morphs and how it changes and transforms as it goes from platform to platform and environment and to environment. And veracity is the last one, which is how true is it? Because Oleg and I can fabricate a conspiracy theory right now, or a lie, which would
Right.
be absolutely fantastic, knowing Oleg, because he spices things up, and it can really fly. And people can take it up. Some people take it up for fun, and some people take it up because they believe it and they're gullible, and some people take it up because they've got nothing else to do. So we will create those 4 Vs. The veracity one is the hardest one to actually meet, because who checks? Who's the ultimate authority on what is true? And this is where, in terms of semantic search, we stumble a lot of the times. We get some false positives and some negatives in terms of search, and that sort of spoils the experience. In terms of how we consume data and how we put things out there, we also sometimes trip up things. So using those 4 V's to create the data structures that we actually generate in terms of our content, we need to also think what else affects things. Now, data is basically affected by context, and context changes the quality of data that we actually put out there because it is interpretive. And to give an example of that, suppose I have a pizza restaurant, to give something sort of fairly neutral, and I have the best pizza restaurant in my area. I put a lot of content out there. Now that pizza restaurant is only good to the people in my area because if it appears in any other kind of search query, it's useless. People are going to say, what is this rubbish? So basically that shows how context gives value to something and how context can also devalue it. So it doesn't matter how valuable your content is. It doesn't matter how valuable the stuff which you put out there is. If you haven't taken context into account, then it's not going to be as valuable as you think it is. And in order to take context into account, you have to step out of yourself and use empathy now to step into the shoes of those people who are likely to be your potential customers. And that's, from a mindset point of view, it's quite disruptive because we in the past when it didn't do that. And it's also quite transformative in terms of the quality of results we get.
But when you say step into other people's shoes, it's such a. I realize it's very easy to say that, but in terms of physically doing that, considering, I've always brought up this point to you, that before, it's such a subjective thing in terms of what different people want, what they like, what they prefer, that trying to step into them will only go a very little into it because you're always looking at it from your perspective, because that's the only perspective you can really relate to because it's you. But if you try to think about how other people are going to be doing it if you were in their shoes, but realistically speaking, you don't know. I mean, if you're selling bread, then your customers are going to be buying bread. That's a key deal. But in terms of trying to figure out, without looking at the history of what was purchased, in terms of when David comes through the door, if he's going to buy ciabatta or he's going to buy French bread, no idea. I mean, I can think that
I totally sympathize with this, and Oleg, you're bringing up an endemic problem for every business owner and every content creator. Usually, what's important to us in terms of a business person is what we do. What is important to us in terms of a content creator is the message we are crafting in the content that we're creating. So then, somebody like me comes along and says, you got to be more empathic, you got to think through the eyes of your audience. And you say, okay, this is totally subjective. And from a certain perspective, you're 100% right. You think, okay, how can I possibly step into your shoes? Because I can't step into your brain and think like you. I can't. Except we can have a good stab at it if we do our research, if we have sufficient knowledge, if we have sufficient awareness, if we build up sufficient data resources. And you've already given me hints of that. If you look at the way, let's just say, you have your bakery, and you can see that those guys who wear expensive leather jackets generally at 70% go and buy ciabatta. And those guys who wear expensive denim jackets go and buy French bread. They buy baguettes. So then you begin to realize a little bit of what's important to a very specific segment of your clientele. And you're only doing that through the data available to you. So the challenge here is, great, how do I start thinking like my audience if I can't at all possibly visualize them? And this is important. Well, the answer to this is develop data sources. Look at your Google Analytics, look at the demographics of that, put out polls out there, carry out surveys, put in a competition where you're asking people to do specific things which will allow you to segment your customer base. Now, none of this...
Customer loyalty program, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, there you go, which allows you to create that relationship with your customers, which then helps you to get to know them. And none of this is rocket science. Before we started the web, we, in small scale environments, and for bigger companies in larger scale environments, we used to do all those things. The web came along, and we thought, oh, those things don't matter anymore. Now all that matters is website and bandwidth and numbers and keywords. It did at the time. And now we're back in a very nuanced, granular environment where everybody is very cautious in how they operate. And we're back to that. So if I feel I don't really know you, a little bit, I'm very hesitant to do business with you. If you feel you don't know me a little bit, you have no idea how to market to me. So really the key here is building that relationship. However, through whatever mechanism we actually manage to build it. And the loyalty program, which you mentioned, and I know you've worked extensively with restaurants, you have a custom created loyalty programs, you have extensive experience there. That's key. And a restaurant environment has very tight profit margins, very competitive market. If they don't have that personal relationship with their customers, they're on a losing edge. They're going to sort of eventually fall off the edge on that one. So having that relationship with your customers now is key.
And my program enables me to do it, enables them to do it. So there's a little pitch for me. David, the check is in the mail.
Thank you. Thank you. Totally unintentional, but thank
Yeah,
you.
exactly. But going back to the serious part again, is so what would you specifically recommend people do to make the 4 V's come out? In other words, to have the velocity and veracity. In other words, the volume, obviously, you can generate a lot of posts, you can create a lot of content, but as we, everybody can tell you, that's not the best way to do SEO. Just because you have a ton of content doesn't mean it's going to be anything positive for you. It's not about the volume itself, it's just part of it. But in terms of these other components, putting them all together, what would you recommend like a small business guy do in terms of his online presence to make sure these 4 V's actually occur for them?
Well, let's start from the end result. Why do we do all this? We do it so we can create valuable content. How do we know content is valuable? Well, because people love it, they share it, they are enthusiastic about it, it helps our brand, it gives us customer loyalty, or it turns our leads into sales. If that's what we need, valuable content, then we need to ask, okay, what is of value to our audience? Now, even the most raw business person, a complete rookie, has some idea of what is of value to the people he's trying to sell to. So you start with that, start creating content from that. And as you engage more in terms of comments, emails, check out your Google Analytics, see what your customer journey is, go into social media platforms, see how the audience engages there with the content which you share. And that will start giving you an idea of what's important to them. And I'll give you an example in terms of how something changed because of that for me. When I wrote Google Semantic Search, which was the first book on semantic search at a very early stage, I had 0 guides. There was no other book out there. I wasn't sure how to structure it. And the subject is so huge that you can structure it in many different ways. You can make it very popular. You can make it very academic. You can make it very mathematical. And when I'm ever sort of uncertain, I tend to go towards the academic and mathematical because there's a degree of certainty in the research and the figures, whereas everything else is up for grabs. So I started putting out content on Google Plus at the time, sharing ideas about my book as I was writing it. And the reaction of the audience and the problems they had with the content which I was presenting them with, and the way I had then to explain what I was putting out there, guided me towards rewriting significant sectors of it to become a lot more popular, a lot more accessible. Mm-hmm. And that was the classic example of connecting with a potential audience, realizing their problems, which I admittedly I hadn't, and becoming more empathetic in terms of what they needed, and restructuring my writing to actually meet that need. And the reception of the book when it came out bore testament to my approach. But if I hadn't done that, if I hadn't been brave enough to actually think, okay, I need to understand what their problems are, I would have written perhaps a book that might have been mathematically and academically a lot better, but it wouldn't have met the audience reception that it did.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons I think SEO Help is such a wonderful book, is because it doesn't, it's the other day I was talking to this one client, and the guy was going, he says, I really like that you're talking to me like a layman. And so you think it's almost like a insult. It's like, I don't mean to talk to you like you don't understand anything. I'm the only one who understands it. But I knew he meant it as a compliment, because when people dump on him all kinds of technical stuff, then people just that don't know it, get overwhelmed, and that's the end of it. So it's the same thing with your book. And that's why I think like SEO Help was such a helpful book, because you're not dumping a lot of, all kinds of little references and information about the statistics and all the stuff that people just kind of go, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I don't understand what he's saying. You're talking to them from a practical standpoint as people would talk without any of the jargon of the industry. And I think that's what makes SEO Help such a great book. At least that's what I think, is because it really talks to people in a language they can understand. Anybody can understand that book. You don't need to be a computer
Yes,
scientist.
SEO Help actually came about from countless talks I had with corporate SEO teams, and their questions became the foundation for it. So it's very conversational in style, and that's its strength, because that was the basis
Right.
of the book itself. So again, this is a classic example of me understanding what the audience actually needed. And in the beginning, I was admittedly very surprised because, being corporate SEO teams, I thought their understanding of search would have been at a higher level, and their grasp of what they had to do would have been a lot more technical, and it wasn't.
And I think that's the key thing, going back to what you said earlier about the fact that you need to understand your audience. Obviously, you need to have your own identity is one thing, but you also need to understand your audience, because being empathetic sounds simple, but again, because it's such a subjective view or anything else, it's a very difficult thing to do. But
Yes.
if you talk to these people, like you were talking to all these corporate people and they were asking you questions, in terms of business here, people can send out surveys, people can talk to the customers, things like that. That's how you become empathetic, by simply having them tell you what they're interested in. And this whole process with SEO and getting into all the stuff David was talking about is not something that is simple. Nobody says it's simple where, here are the instructions, 5 steps, and you're golden. It doesn't work like that. You do need to take some of these steps if you really want it to work. Then you definitely need to take the steps necessary to make sure your identity is in place correctly. Make sure that you do talk to these other people. Make sure you understand what they want, and then you can work on bringing them what they want, and then your 4 V's are going to fall into place because of that. Is that accurate?
That is correct. Exactly. That's exactly correct. And and what you said is a bit earlier about how hard it is to be empathetic, how hard it is to build that empathy. It is 100% right. Doing everything, anything, being in business or being just ourselves on a day-to-day life is incredibly difficult. And then being able to step outside ourselves and see what we do through other people's eyes, that is, so hard to do. So we need some kind of in, and all the suggestions you put out there about polls, apps, or any kind of content and analytics, they're absolutely correct, and that's the way to go.
Starting with customer loyalty program, of course.
Absolutely, of course, priority.
No, but interesting, again, jokes here are always cool. But this morning, right before the hangout, I got a phone call because I looked at this ad, which was basically very misleading about refinancing homes. And I'm not going to go into all the minutia, but the bottom line was the guy called me today. And so, first of all, it was a lady who got some verification done about the address and the balance and blah, blah, blah. All I'm trying to do is get a rate. What can you give me better rate for my mortgage than I have now? So it's a very simple thing. Yes or no, right? So we go through all this rigmarole. It takes 5 minutes to get through with her. Then she puts me to some guy. He starts talking to me, and I'm trying to explain to him that, you want to save money? Yes, I want to, lower monthly payment. So we go through all that. And then I said, can you just tell me what, he keeps asking all these questions, like, can you just tell me what rate can you give me? He says, well, first of all, he says, I want to, but let me educate you. And talk about a stupid statement to make to me at that point in time. You're going to tell me that you're going to be educating me? That's not what I called. I asked you for a rate. If you can give it to me, give it to me. If you can't, don't waste my time. And so I just wound up just totally just telling the guy that we're done here and hanging up, because it's ridiculous. And the guy was getting mad because I wasn't answering his questions. And that's one of the things. I think this is a perfect example where companies do not listen. They're not being empathetic. He tells me that, a bunch of people at call, they always want to know the rate. Well, genius, if that's what people are asking you, then maybe that's what you should be working in giving them, because everybody is asking you the same thing. But let me educate you, he says. So everybody is asking for the rate, but he wants to educate me. That's not what we're doing.
It's been trained to do something in a very specific way for probably some kind of corporate vision, which
This is a
doesn't fit.
business skilling approach as far as I'm concerned. The bottom line here is exactly what you said. is that you need to listen to your customers. That's
Yes.
the best way to be empathetic. Okay, you don't
Yes.
need to do a lot. You don't need to ask a lot of questions. Just listen to what they're bringing in, what they would like to do, or just ask them, what would you like to see me do, or would you like to see the company do? And when they tell you this stuff, then you absorb all this into some kind of way. You can aggregate it, and then you go with your online presence based on that, and you give people what they want. If you think about it, why are you in business? You're in business to make money. Okay, everybody's in business to make money, right? How are you making money? By having customers come and giving you the money. They're giving you the money for some value you provide. What kind of value? You need to find out from them. Once you find out from them, then you can give them the value, they'll give you the money. I mean, it doesn't sound like it's that complex of a deal, and
It's
it's
not.
absolutely
It's not.
stuns
When
me.
you when you break it down like that, it's fundamentally simple. Unfortunately, it takes us a long time to see the fundamentals. We get lost in the details, and that's what you experience. And I know it's frustrating. And in different industries, we see exactly the same examples as you just gave us for the
No,
same
but
reasons.
do you agree with what I'm saying, David, as a
100%.
customer?
Yeah. I think the fundamentals. What you
Okay,
said.
so you agree with it, I agree with it. I'm sure a lot of people also agree. Why don't these companies listen to this and pay attention? It's not that complicated. So why don't
Because
they do this?
the structure which they have as a corporate entity doesn't allow them to transfer your contact, your frustration from the person you spoke to the person who is responsible for making a decision to change it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
So to simplify it even further, the communication. We are really bad at it generally. Companies are really, really bad. And the bigger the company, the worse it is. And we talked about Google Plus. I'm pretty sure communication within Google itself about Google Plus has all sorts of issues.
Yeah.
So
We need to be running all this stuff is basically the bottom line, because
yes, you
they
and
just
I,
don't get it.
absolutely.
They just don't
I,
get
I
it.
couldn't agree more.
Okay, let's move on. So for 4Vs, I think we kind of got to the gist of it. Let's talk about strings and things, from strings to things, you said. So let's talk about that. What does it mean, and how does it apply to today's world?
It's important because, again, it's a transition of search from what it was to what it is. And the transition from strings, which is essentially a mathematical designation of something which is theoretical as in a concept, to basically things which have a real world meaning, a real world existence, even if they're fictional. So if we talk about, for instance, Harry Potter, yes, he's a fictional character, but it's a fictional character whom we all understand who he is, and we all understand his history, etc., etc. And there's a list of attributes which make him a fleshed out entity, although it's a fictional entity. So in the real world, we have examples of both fictional and real world entities, and they interact and engage in terms of how they relate, and that changes all sorts of things. Before semantic search came along, search had zero ways of knowing when something was false or when something was real or when something was part of something or it was a whole thing. So everything was equal to it, which meant that if everything is equal, false and truth was the same, and everything was guided by keywords and sort of techniques which could game search in many ways. We get into today, and the discussion we had about the evolution of the web, discussion we had about how data has evolved and how we use it, empathy, all those things, we're beginning to act in ways which are more fleshed out, a lot more nuanced in their approach. Search itself is driven by artificial intelligence and algorithms that filter massive data sets in terms of how activity is generated and from where. And all this is giving weight to digital presences which have taken the trouble to create what we call now semantic density. And by semantic density, here's what I mean. Suppose you step out of your house today and you're wearing a shirt, shoes, and shorts, board shorts, which are for surfing, and you go to work. Fundamentally, you've clothed yourself and you say, oh yeah, that's sufficient, but we know it isn't, because the social signals which you send around that in terms of your intention to work and how serious you take what you do and how you present yourself are wrong, and they're going to affect your co-workers, they're going to affect the way your company sees you, and you're probably going to lose your job. The social signals which you send out to your neighbors as you step out of your house in winter dress like that are going to be wrong, and there's going to be repercussions. The social signals which you send to your immediate social group are going to be wrong, and relationships will falter because of that. So basically, the metadata we generate through our choices and decisions is key to how we're perceived, which means that it's key to how the relationships are formed, which means that basically what is important here is the strength of the connections, the quality of those connections. And that's exactly the same in search. So if we're creating semantic density on a website, well, it's not enough for your website to say, okay, you know, if you're selling bread, to have just a few pictures of bread, because that's what people are going to buy.
Right.
You need to have more than that. You need to actually flesh it out and explain about your choice of oven and why it's using that particular oven. Why have you invested so much? Why are you choosing a particular type of flour? How did you learn to make bread, and what sort of techniques do you use? And why did you
Just
choose to be in
eventually
that
get back
particular
to
area?
your book on trust, which is, if you take all this minutia and kind of blow it up, in the end, it's all about ending up with trust. Because if
Yes.
people that you're
Yeah.
dealing with trust you, they're going to deal with you. If they don't trust you, it doesn't matter what pictures you put up, what you say, what you wear. It makes no difference. They're not going to deal with you. So essentially, all of this that we're talking about here, that whatever you're creating, we're talking about the flower. You're talking about that you open, 7 days a week, and the fact that, all of these things you're trying to both inform, but at the same time present a picture, if you will, to the person that doesn't know you, that will make him feel like, yes, I can trust this person, especially if you have, some testimonial videos where people say that, this is the best bread they've tasted since they've been to, Paris or whatever, and on and on and on. Then, essentially, like I said, the bottom line is, with all of these different things, is trust. If you can
Yes,
create
it is.
something that people will make people trust you, then they're going to deal with you, and that's the name of the game.
Yeah. I mean, this is, again, any kind of relational exchange in order to take place. Even if it's like a greeting or anything else, there has to be some kind of assessment of trust in that equation. Even more so when it comes to commercial transactions, which happen across the internet.
Sure.
There's no central authority. So yeah, if there's no trust, if there's no relationship, it's unlikely to happen.
Excellent. Okay, well, with that, I think we're going to wrap it up since it's been a little longer but we got some bonuses in there, so that's cool. And we're going to have one more hangout with David, which will be soon, hopefully. It's not going to be as long as this time.
No, certainly, yeah, we were hoping to get it definitely within this month.
And if anybody doesn't have SEO help, book. I guess before we go, David, one last question I want to ask you. Obviously, information, everything that, the way our lives are, everything changes. We don't look like we did even when we started these hangouts. So, everything changes. So the question I have for you is, how does SEO help today? How not important, I'm sure it's important, how relative it is to the current environment, considering the fact that it was written years ago. In other words, would you still recommend people get the book today and apply everything in it? Would you
It's still
recommend they
valid
get it
to
and then
90.
how do you look at that?
It's still valid to 90% of the content, simply because the questions which came out from each chapter are questions which teams have in their way they operate, and the answers which the chapter is intended to provide are fairly timeless. The book recently won an award for one of the best SEO books of all time for that reason, because it has a kind of timelessness. So if you get it today, you still, and if you follow the steps, perhaps with the exclusion of Google Plus now because that's being closed down, but you still have a social media presence across the web. You will benefit from it, definitely, and it will definitely help you increase your understanding of how things are happening and why they happen.
I just want to point out that right now on Amazon, you can get SEO help for just $7.99, the Kindle version. So it's
Yes.
super cheap to get.
Yeah,
And if you're one of the dinosaurs, then definitely get the paperback for $23.94. A little bit more expensive, but not too bad. And but seriously though, whatever your preference, there is a Kindle version, there is a paperback version, and the book is available. You can get it from Amazon. You can get it from David Amerland's site, which is davidamerland.com. You can get it from a bunch of other places too. I mean, Barnes and Noble. So everybody, all the better book places certainly have it, and you can definitely order it and get it. And so with that,
Yeah, and from a website, I actually have a special offer where you can actually get a signed copy. Well, I have a few copies left. So if you go to my website and actually check it out and put an order through and tell me
but
what
let's
you want
tell
on.
this is
Yeah.
limited right now to the first 1,000,000 people. As we can't.
Well, I wish I had that many copies. I don't, and I'm running out of them because I had about 50 which came in through last week.
Yeah.
But I still have a few copies left. So while the
But
copies
seriously
last,
though, yeah, let's if you don't have the book, you can order it directly from davidamerland.com, and then that way you get a nice personalization from David himself,
you do. Yes.
which will make the book completely priceless, obviously going forward. Uh, people pay a ton of money for a little scratch that Paul McCartney wrote some time ago. So this would be even much more worthwhile and worthy. Anything else, David, you want to say in the end before we wrap it up?
No,
Here?
I think this is it's been a brilliant series up to now, and I think it's given us thanks to the questions which you bring up every time. It's given us a lot of leverage to pry the web open and look at some of the problems which come across. As we're wrapping up this series, we still have one episode to go probably. We are going to start thinking about how we can deliver more value to this, and really the way things are going, you need to think. As a business owner, what are the steps which I can take to create that semantic density which begins to project my true identity on the web?
Yeah, and just one last thing I'm going to wrap up with is that we did develop this little tool, companion tool for the book that's available for free
Yes,
online.
that's right. Yeah.
And people who buy the book, just for those that don't know, it's got 20 chapters, and each chapter has 10 basically 10 action steps that need to be done and questions that need to be answered. So you're totally guided. David basically guides you through the book, and of course it's going to be relevant to your business, which will be different for other businesses. So questions are being asked that will be relevant to every business, but the answers will be based on whatever you think is appropriate. So we put together this little online companion tool, which you can go to the Google Plus community for SEO help, and it's got links in there how you can get to it. And then you're able to then document in that companion tool, you're able to go online and actually document answers to all those questions in all those chapters. So at the end, you have almost like a blueprint of what you should be doing SEO wise based on you reading this book. And then because otherwise it's too hard to keep track. If you're actually writing answers for 10 questions times 20, that's 200 answers. It's kind of tough to keep it somewhere. And of course you can write it down if you wanted to, but this way it makes it easier because you can easily go read it, change it. It's much easier. So either way, however you do it, there is a companion tool, there is a book, Kindle version or a printed version available with personalized from David. Again, to reiterate, this book was just recently voted as the best SEO book. It was the best SEO book out there, right, David?
Yeah, of all time. Yeah. It's a list of about 20 or 30 books, I think there,
Okay,
and
so
that was one of the
best
books in there.
SEO book of all time, which is quite a deal, and big congratulations.
It is, yeah. I was quite thrilled.
It's a huge deal without any question. So you can get your own copy, however you want to get it. Certainly totally worthwhile. If you're running a business and you care about SEO, yes, you could be paying $500+ to somebody to come in and do it for you and not necessarily do a great job, or you can actually do the job better yourself, in my opinion, because nobody knows your business like you do. Nobody you can hire out there for any amount of money would know your business as well as you do. So that's why it makes sense that you answer the questions relevant to what needs to be stated for your business, and then you apply the program accordingly. Plus, you can watch all the prior videos we've done in this series, which we kind of go one chapter at a time, except in some cases, like today, we went 2 chapters because there was just not enough to cover in just one chapter. And definitely get the book. And David, with that, I thank you very much. And until next time, we're done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye-bye.